Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Photographer Life Check. And today we have an incredible guest with us. We have the Alexis Hunley. Alexis, I want to start with you like I do everybody else with the photographer fit check. Can you let the people know what you're wearing, maybe why you wearing it? It could be jewelry, t-shirt, however you feel.
I think the most important piece, most prominent piece, is this wonderful t-shirt.
Period.
My favorite shirt, one of my good friends, Def Sound, phenomenal artist, writer, and also happens to be the creative director for my project we're going to talk about today.
Ooh.
This shirt with a lot of pride and very often. It's one of my favorites, one of my favorite human beings. So my goal is to expand my collection of t-shirts to have all of my friends' faces at some point. So
Yes, I love a good artist merch. As per usual, all the gems we have from today will be in the description box, which will include Def Sound. So let me get their Instagram at the end of this to make sure I got the right one.
absolutely. Yeah. Other than that, just the usual jewelry. I got this recently from my great aunt. She was cleaning out her closet. Had
Was
to,
it say bad?
it says bad. Yeah. Had to grab that.
Period.
It just seemed appropriate. And then the sun tarot card.
Ooh, what does the sun mean?
Sun is like joy, vitality, and success. And, it seemed appropriate. It seemed like something. If I'm going to keep something on me, why not bring that energy in?
That's a nice choice. I like that. And I've also never seen a tarot card pendant before. That feels very beautiful and unique.
Thank you.
Also, the rings too. On fire. I feel
Really.
like there's even with your t-shirt, there's a silver gold mix happening that is very lovely. I'm into it.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Photographer fit check for me is this scarf. It's been my moment lately. I got it down at this vintage shop in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I was there recently. And at that vintage shop, I was really hoping to find some fly ass cow boots or something, cowboy boots. And I did, but they weren't my size. So instead, I had to walk away with a scarf and some shades. I got some shades there too. It was
All
cute.
right. Yeah, I love that blue. That's one of my favorite types of blue.
I know, right? Same. And I was like, I actually don't have much of this type of blue in my closet. So let me snag that. It also says aloha on it, which is not very cowboy like, but I was very into it.
I mean,
It's
love
still the
it.
vibe.
Absolutely. No, it's a good find. It's a good find. That blue is really, really special.
Yeah, I feel that too. It feels like one of the more calming but very lively blue at the same time. Like it feels
Absolutely.
very powerful to me.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's get into the life check. For those who might be tuning in for the first time, photographer life check can be anything from how you're feeling in this moment to something incredible happening in your career or just the moment you're in your life. So, photographer life check, if you want, it could be about the project we'll be talking about today.
I mean,
What's your check in?
project is my life at this point. So that
Okay.
that is my life. Yeah, but if we have to do a more current, sort of standing of where life is good. Life is finally feeling a little bit more stable, more settled. Um,
Mm,
just feeling very grateful, spending a lot of time with family. My great aunt, she's turning 92 this year. A
yes.
lot of time with her. She has an impeccable memory, and I get a lot of anecdotes and little stories about my grandmother and the rest of the family, as well as little gifts like this.
That's
Um,
awesome.
just deep in the process of making this project come to life. Spent a lot of time with Def,
Mm-hmm.
chatting and imagining and dreaming up how things will look on the other side of this. So
Mm.
that's life. Yeah, or spending time in the garden, I'm growing some potatoes.
Okay, come
Excited,
on.
really excited about the potatoes. They're coming to life. And my mom is also working on some stuff. She just got avocado trees, some cucumbers, some tomatoes.
Wow.
So when I'm not sitting in here amongst my things, then I'm out pretending to be a farmer in the yard.
I already see the archive right there. I can't wait to get into it. But it feels quite aligned, even just with the project we'll be talking about today.
Mhm.
Um, so before diving just like way into it, I want to provide context about the artist that you are and then lead into the project. If you're seeing the title, I'm definitely going to name this conversation Call Me ZZ. It's the title of Alexis' project that we've been talking about today. Also, if you've been here before, you know we love talking about the archival work. So this is so aligned. But let me just start off by reading your bio. It says Alexis Hunley is a Los Angeles-based photographer, archivist, director, and Alexis Hunley centers intimacy, memory, and reclamation in her work as it relates to the cultural and socio-political underpinnings of Black American life. Utilizing documentary and archival processes, Alexis explores ancestral memory and intergenerational healing as a means to acknowledge and and celebrate the beauty and complexity of the human experience. When I read your bio, I was like, oh, this is exactly what this project feels like.
Mm.
And in particular, some of the projects on your website. So I want to pull up your website. I love having like things for folks to look at while we're having this conversation and like really dive into your work. And while I go through that, maybe can you just tell us if you remember what called you to photography in the first place?
Absolutely. It's a simple answer. It was my grandmother. She passed away. That was the catalyst for
Mm,
this. Not just this project, but my entire photography career started because she passed. And
wow.
to be really frank, I was just kind of spiraling out, just kind of like floating in the abyss, untethered. And all of my fondest memories of her with a camera in her hand.
Mm,
And I had always really enjoyed cameras, photography, video work, but never actually considered it as something that I could pursue. And
mm-hmm.
so what started as a way to like grieve and like stay connected to her eventually blossomed into, this wonderful career path that I've chosen.
Wow, that's so beautiful and also like heartbreaking all at the same time. It seems like you're especially, or maybe that artistic practice especially comes out during these photo series and projects that you have listed on your website. Would you say that that's true, or is this like some other part of your artistic expression?
I would say, I think you hit the nail on the head. It is true
Mm,
in large part. I think I've always kind of been this type of person. Even as a little kid, like I was very shy and we moved around a lot, but I was always very in tune with other people and other people's emotions. And because
mm-hmm,
I was a little bit more reserved and often being shuttled from, state to state and school to school, I spent a lot of time watching and observing and trying to figure people out. And so when I have a camera in my hand, it's kind of an extension of that. Like I'm looking, I'm watching, I'm seeing in order to understand people. And I think what I've realized over the last couple of years is that it's really an attempt to better understand myself. Is really
mm-hmm. It feels that way. I love your work so much, and I really just wanted to establish some of your other work before we hopped directly into the project. And it seems like the perfect footing, honestly, considering your grandma is the reason you started photography anyway. So let's just straight get into it. Like I said before, we love archives. We love talking about archives, especially family archives. Um, and this conversation is very special to me. Beforehand, for context for folks, Alexis sent me the Substack and the Instagram to this project, and I read everything, and I was on the verge of tears, Alexis.
Oh,
This is legitimately the work that I think I've been trying to figure out how to do within my own family archive. And it was so beautiful to see the ways you're like constructing it. And I love that some of your posts are shorter and some of them are longer. Um, Also, just the depth of the archive. My goodness, you have video
yeah.
and photo. And it's just absolutely stunning. So I'm going to pull that up next. So can you tell us how you came to this project? I know you mentioned a little bit at the top after her passing, but can you just explain how you got there?
Absolutely. So I got a phone call from my aunt. It's like September 2022. Um, and she was like, "Hey, I have all of this stuff from your grandmother, like her cameras and stuff. I know this is what you do for work. Do you want it?" And I was like,
Mm.
"Yes, absolutely." A little context, my grandfather had passed in 2020. My grandmother passed in 2016. We ended up having to sell their house in 2020. And so after the house sold and the estate settled, um, my grandmother's like archive and cameras and things ended up at my aunt's house in the garage for 2 years. Um, and after, things settled, I got that phone call and I'm thinking like, oh, she's probably going to drop off like 2 or 3 boxes. She ended up dropping
Right.
amongst like 2 or 3 different trips from LA to Long Beach, like 13 full moving boxes and like big plastic tubs of like everything. Um, I was not prepared, as you can see. It took me quite some time. I was a bit overwhelmed, but I have
Yeah.
never been more grateful um, to, be gifted with so much. Like it took a bit of sorting, but it was everything from, like photo albums and loose prints. I found a painting. I found, Super 8, found 16 millimeter, the little cassettes from the voicemail machine,
Mm.
lawsuits. I think one of the wildest things I found was like the slides from the lab from when she got her cancer diagnosis were in there. Like
Whoa.
her life, our family's history, um, all condensed into these boxes.
Mm.
The breadth of everything was just like I just started. I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never handled an archive. I had a rudimentary sort of like digital system for organizing my own work, but I'd never dealt with physical items
Yeah.
in that manner. And so I understood that what I had was really special. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I didn't know how much I had, but I just knew like, okay, let's at least get things cleaned up, restored, properly preserved so that I can figure out what's going on. And so I spent at least the next year and a half just sort of digging through things, starting to digitize. As of today, I've digitized just shy of 12,000 files. So
Whoa.
audio files, digital files, each page of a lawsuit, everything like that, photos, and I'm maybe like 3/4 of the way done.
That is so impressive.
Yeah, it's there was a period of time where I was just all day, every day, I'd have TV going over here that was like digitizing VHS tapes, and I had my scanner going over here, and I'm busting out like 300 files a week, and I got this going in the back, and I'll just go from station to station uh,
Mm.
every single day for like a month or two at a time, and so very
It,
grateful
yeah.
was able to have the time and the space to do that, but you know.
Yeah. I mean, and it also sounds like you weren't really archiving before then. Like you just had to like pick up where it literally dropped off in your
Yes.
lap.
Yep.
And you made a whole post about it. I keep calling them episodes in my head. Like every time I talk about your Substack, I'm like, I'm tuned into episode favorite finds number 3. Like I love it so much. But I wanted to talk about this part in particular
Mhm.
because many of us are trying to figure out our archives and how to do it. And like you just said, you kind of started off from scratch. And what I love about this post, let me see the name of it again. All right, now where do I begin on Alexis's Substack? You'll see the breakdown of tools, a full exhaustive list of tools that she used to begin and continue this process. Would you say that since then this list has evolved, or is this still like your go-to?
I think for the most part, it's still pretty much everything that I'm using or have used.
Mm-hmm.
I've made my way through most of the video files are done. So I'm not using
Mm,
those on a regular basis, but for the prints, for like papers and stuff, like using the scanner, using my camera, using what I have, those specific types of boxes and file folders, like still very much is what I'm using or having to like stock up on. What I did find recently is that like I'm continuing to learn more as time
Mm-hmm.
goes on, taking different workshops and classes to better understand how to care for these things, especially when we're thinking about digital files, making sure that I'm um, using correct formatting and storing things properly and just having a better base of knowledge for how to tend to these things has also been really helpful. So I may at some point have to make another updated post just to kind of take everybody along with me as I'm sort of learning new things. But yeah, that list
Yeah.
is still very much up to date on what I'm using.
You also mentioned in that post a person named Sierra King, where they taught you how to build your own archive. And I think you attached their link
Mhm.
also. So you could, whoever's listening, you guys could use Alexis list, the Sierra King's list, kind of figure out what you already have, what you have access to formulate like your own process and what you can afford in order to archive the pieces that you have.
Absolutely. Yeah, Sierra's resources were invaluable, especially the template for like creating like a custodial database. Like I still use
Mm-hmm.
that to this day. I have not been as diligent. I need to get back to
Mm-hmm.
it because it's quite tedious, but being able to essentially have like an index so that you know where everything is and you have a central place to look is really, really key because I didn't know how many items I would have. I've had to start over and revamp and change my system a few times as I've kind of been,
Mm.
which has made things, extended the process. I've spent more time than has probably been necessary. So I'm hoping that, nobody else has to suffer in the ways that
Alexis did that, so you ain't had to, okay?
like,
No, but I mean, you're dealing with so many different types of things to archive. Like you already mentioned, audio, video, prints. You also have like Super 8 slides and in comparison to VHS. Like it's a lot of different mediums you're working with. So I imagine you'll have to create a lot of different systems.
absolutely.
Yeah. Not too hard on yourself, Alexis.
Doing my
You did
best.
what needed to be done.
Great. I'm here. I'm showing up every day.
Right. Okay. Let's get into it. I was deeply emotional reading your story, reading your grandma's story, and a few things you said throughout your writing, which is also written so beautifully. Oh my God. Um, really stood out to me. And here's one quote. You said, "Witnessing myself love and be loved overwhelms me with joy and grief and nostalgia and delight and memory. Observing the love that has shaped me, fed me, and pushed me through every peak and valley is such a visceral experience. And if I'm being honest, it is really difficult to put into words, and I welcome the experience." Whew! My goodness. So I think I think this landed so heavily on me because I think so much specifically about the lineage of women I come from. I have always been very curious about family history. I call myself like a photo album kid ever since I can remember, which is about 5 or 6. I want to go through photo albums of everybody's, my friends, and still to this day, I feel that way. And one thing that stands out to me is the witnessing myself love and be loved. And I think in particular, considering you have video
Mhm.
of yourself as a child, you get to know the things you were saying and how the affinity you had for your grandmother, which I think is so beautiful to see. I mean, memory is so unreliable. And one thing that I kind of contend with is the fact that um, a part of me worries that all we will have left one day is memory, and memory is unreliable. And I think that's why I was so excited also to see how vast this archive is. So I'm curious, in your self reflection that you have here, and seeing yourself at different ages, but especially as a child, um, what do you think, or maybe what else, because I'm sure you've had many thoughts since doing this process, but what are you thinking about yourself as you go through this archive? Because so much of the reflection is about your grandma and the relationship with your grandma. And while you do that, I'll pull up another page from the Substack. But yeah, what do you think about yourself at these different ages? I mean, you're a really young kid in a lot of these photos.
Wow, what a question. Um, it's funny because I tend to habitually externalize and think about other people and look about other people,
Mm,
and as a way to sort of avoid looking at myself. I've come to realize. Um, and
cool.
so what I have learned about myself is that like there is a deep well of feelings and emotions that just like really hasn't been acknowledged for a very long time. Like some of the earlier videos and stuff, like I was a very emotional, expressive child. And then there's a period shortly after we moved away from my grandmother where you can see that I just completely shut down. And there's
Mm,
no, like, nobody can pinpoint a specific moment or catalyst, but going through the letters and the photos and like, it was because I was away from my grandmother.
mm-hmm.
And so being able to acknowledge that now as an adult, um, it is, it's heavy and it's weighty, but it's also like I have the context and the empathy for my parents and understanding their decisions. But it's like I finally have the ability to kind of give myself the space to feel whatever it is I feel about that, the anger, the frustration, the grief, maybe even some gratitude. Like things played out as they did. But I see where I was let down,
Mm,
and I get to I get to construct my life in a way that um, is actually in service of what I need. I
mm-hmm.
get to be selfish for once, which is so odd for me to say, but it's like I'm now finally getting to give myself the things that like I wasn't able to receive as a little kid.
I feel like that's a part of adulting, right? The reparenting ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it does, it feels weighted. I think it's the duality of it, where some parts of it is kind of beautiful. Like, look what I am capable of now. Look at the thing I get to give myself that I missed out on, and feeling proud of that. And at the same time, still knowing that there's this part of you that lives inside of you that was missing out for however long it was.
Yeah.
It's tough to go through. Also, thinking about, it's kind of crazy because you're doing that through this dedication to your grandma.
Mm-hmm.
So that even still, the duality of like, I'm going to do something for myself is still in dedication to someone else is really beautiful.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's easier for me to center myself if I've tricked myself. Like I can trick myself if I make it about her. And it makes me laugh because it's very much something that she would do. My grandmother was very behind the scenes. She was not trying to be in the mix. She was very quiet.
Mm,
She did what she needed to do, and she was not to be played with. But like,
period.
for example, there was a time where the the city, was trying to cut down all the trees in the neighborhood because they said they were diseased. Um,
Mm,
I don't know if that was necessarily true. She didn't think it was true. She thought it was just anti-blackness and the trappings of gentrification. And she, instead of like, she tried to rally some neighbors, but like didn't want to be the face. And so,
mm,
people are kind of like, if the alarm bells aren't ringing, they're not necessarily gonna like jump into gear. Everybody doesn't want to always be in the front. And so she ended up just filing a lawsuit for herself and like getting the trees outside of her house protected because she wasn't able
mm.
to kind of like be the leader and jump in front and get everybody to rally. You know, she didn't want to be the face. And I understand that feeling very well.
Yeah,
And I also recognize I don't really have a choice anymore. So I'm like, okay, if I got to do it, I'll do it with her. I'll do it for her.
come
I'll make
on.
her, I'll drag her along with me.
I think you wrote about that being like, I think you described it something like her last project that she worked on.
Yeah. Mhm.
Do you know how far it went? Like, was she able to save those trees?
So she saved the trees. The last lawsuit that she was attempting to get going was against the water company. There's a
Mm,
water reservoir across the street from her house. And she felt like from her, essentially, she started her own independent investigation and
mm,
was convinced that there was something at odds, something nefarious is too strong of a word, but something off with what was happening with the water company. Maybe there was leaking and potentially messing with water supply. She ended up dying of cancer. There were a few other neighbors in the area that ended up
mm.
with cancer. Um, and she was pushing really hard to try to stop them from developing land next to the water reservoir and some other things. She was concerned. She had environmental concerns. My grandfather was a judge, and she was looking for support from him to get those things filed. And he dropped
Yeah.
the ball, and
Mm,
they weren't filed or things didn't move along. And just watching her try to navigate like a terminal diagnosis and like putting energy into the thing that she thought she could control, which was this lawsuit, but like felt like nobody was helping her, was really, really difficult to watch. And maybe at some point it's a project I'll be able to pick up in some way to kind of,
mm-hmm.
honor her. But yeah, that was a difficult one. And I don't know that she was necessarily wrong. Um, but it wasn't a fight that she was able to finish.
Mm. I'm
Yeah.
sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
I did see that you described her as like a private investigator,
Yes.
and that she did real groundwork to get this project moving. And I'm sure other things too throughout her like decades and decades long practice of being a documentarian for real. Like it seems like she documented everything.
Everything. Yeah. Like I found some video recently through her front window. She set up the camcorder and was recording like trucks coming in and out of the water reservoir across the street and was like narrating and commenting, giving
Hmm.
timestamps. And then on that same tape is like somebody's birthday and then it's Thanksgiving.
Right.
And it's like, I was just like, I was explaining to a friend, like, she essentially like made case files on each of us, and she had like in her
Wow.
little notebook an entry about me. She was like, oh, it's the date, June something 2012, and Lexi's going to Brazil, she's leaving on this date, this is her flight, this is the city she's going to, I gave her
Wow.
$300, she came by with her friend, Camille said, everything looks like she's having fun on Facebook, she'll be back this date, end of entry. Like that's
That
how.
is like a case study. Like she was thorough.
Yes. Yes. Or like there was another entry I found and she was talking about this. She went to hang out with a group of friends and was describing the day and what they had to eat. And then towards the top, list out each of their names, their height, their weight, and a descriptor. So it was like
Oh.
Lisa, 5'4", 145 pounds, gray cornrows for each different.
Honestly, everybody need a ZZ in your life. In case anything go wrong, I know where to go. Hit the files.
Literally, and if it's not the files, then make sure she has her fanny pack because she did keep the 22 on her.
Period. He said I'm gonna be good on all fronts, on the back end and on the front end.
Okay.
I love it. She sounds so incredible. Another thing that stood out to me about her archive was how much she was within it. And I thought that was so beautiful. And obviously, on the Substack, it's incredibly limited and compared to the actual archive you have, but you're still in the middle of the process. Like, there's still more to be shared. But I thought it was so impressive, even as far as we gotten so far, how much of her was in it. Seeing her as a young woman, I love seeing elders in their youth and just like imagining their life. And it just had me thinking if you're in your own archive yet.
I'm working on it.
Okay.
It is not, it's not an automatic thing. I very
Yeah.
tend to have always tried to be behind the camera. Um, unless people are going to take the time to sort of like get me in the moment.
Mm.
it's not really a thing that happens. Particularly now, even within my family, I'm always the one with the camera. So
Yeah, exactly.
occasionally it'll get handed
Same.
off, but I am doing my best to be more intentional about that.
Nice. It's good. I mean, luckily for you, your grandma handled much of your life already. So
Yeah.
at least that part won't be lost.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think being photographers in general, that happens where we forget to document ourselves, and there are likely fewer people around us that are also documenting, maybe in the way that we might try to get the full scope of what we're seeing. So I just think about so much other photographers keeping themselves in their archive. Now, when you're able to see her at these different stages of her life, I think I also picked up on um, your feeling about like women and the things that she went through, maybe your mom went through.
Mhm.
Um, does seeing her in her youth also kind of inform your process of archiving? Like, does that make you want to do it a specific way? I know you're doing some mixed media stuff. How does that work? If it's a part of it at all.
No, that's a really good question. I think seeing her through all of these stages of life just generally informs um, how I see the world, how I see my mother, how I see all the women in my family, and makes me even more steadfast, strict about
Mm.
how I show up for the women in my life, how I show up for myself, the standards that are being set. I see when I look at all the things that my grandmother went through in her life. Um,
Mhm.
I see all the ways that she suffered, and a lot of times unnecessarily. Um, And instead of getting stuck in the myriad of feelings that come up, I'm like, okay, what can I do to support myself and support the other people in my family so that we're not repeating these same things? Because I see the cycle. I see it starting with her mother, her grandmother, and like working its way down and like larger ways, but also like very, very specific things where I'm like, okay, this has to stop, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do you subscribe to like the generational curse ideology?
I think it holds some weight. Um,
Mhm.
I think if it is a thing, is we're cutting it here. We're not doing it
Period.
anymore. We're not doing it. We're over it. It's not fun. Not having a good time. I don't want any more suffering. I'm not going to be doing these things. So
Yeah.
you know, a lot of these things are out of her control. Dealing with poverty and neglect and abuse and just the ways that she was confined and restricted,
Mhm.
particularly as a woman. Like, she wasn't able to have a bank account until she was like in her early 30s, unless a man was on.
Man.
But seeing how she still constructed her life on her terms to the best of her ability. Um, and now I can look back and see the ways, like, as my grandparent, she was very, very adamant about like supporting each of us and pursuing like whatever freedom looked like for us. So if we had a hobby, if it was a sport, musical, anything, art, she was going to support it. She was going to show up. She was going to pay for it. She was going to push you to do the things that you wanted to do, the things that she may not have had the ability to do to that fullest extent. Um, she wasn't going to necessarily, she wasn't gonna sit and be like, oh my God, yeah, you have a partner, you have a boyfriend, you have a girlfriend, you just like that wasn't the thrill and the excitement and the domestic life dreams.
Mhm.
Oh, you want to do this, you want to do gymnastics, you want to do photography, you want to paint, you like animals. Yes, how can I support this? How can I be there to show up for you to do this thing without her like outright saying it? And I see that,
Yeah.
and so I feel like this project is like she planted those seeds with me very early to want to pursue something like this.
Man, I love women like that. I'm so grateful to even just have one woman like that. Especially thinking about us as kids, to have a woman in your corner that is just like, what do you want to do? What are you thinking about?
Yeah.
And have full interest in that is so, so powerful. And, not exactly to blame the women that um, maybe weren't capable of thinking in that way, especially at that time. They come from a very specific time. And my personal perspective is that it is a lot of survival mode
Yeah.
of being like, when you're going to get married, when you're going to settle down, and that's real. It's such a deep a part of our experience, I think, as women in general, and especially as Black women. So it's really beautiful to hear that. I think just her reverence for you in your personhood
Mhm.
instead of your relationship, and that person being your grandma, like, makes it even better, like times 10. It's like, yes.
Yes, absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. It definitely is about survival for a lot of the women in our lives. And I
Hmm.
have a lot of empathy for each of them. I understand why they show up in those ways, why they push certain things, why they're not able to kind of understand where we might be coming from or see us fully, just
Mm.
simply out of fear. And I hope that the work that I do and the work that you do is able to kind of, act as an example of like something different.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. Speaking of women, I honestly, I tried to read the Substack in order when I first started it, but right when I opened it, I saw the picture of the census, and I said, "Ooh, can't wait to get there." And I think I read the first three posts, and I was like, I need to go back to the census. What is the census saying? Like, what are we doing? I love files like that. And you made a beautiful collage, so I'm going to pull that up too. Also, I'm not pulling up all the art we're talking about because I need y'all to go subscribe to the Substack and read everything and see all the images for yourselves. But I will pull up the census. Can you tell people where to look, how to find those records, if they're trying to look for their folks or anybody in their lineage?
Absolutely. So I got all of that census data from ancestry.com.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
I'm still looking for ways to access it that don't require you to pay for a subscription. So
Yeah.
when I figure that out, even if I got to go dig in records in person or look for other things, I'll be definitely updating. Substack is where I'm going to be sharing everything about this project. So come, you know, end of the summer after I've taken a little break, there'll be quite a bit more to share. So I'll definitely keep that in mind. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
appreciate that.
yeah, absolutely.
So definitely use ancestry.com, at least for now, if y'all are looking for y'all people.
Mm,
I know plenty of people that also use that site and have
yeah,
been trying to connect the dots. So it's still useful for sure.
absolutely.
Uh, I love this collage. I think it's a beautiful way, almost like family tree kind of thing. I think it's a beautiful way to like put together your people. And in this post, you talk about how a descendant of yours is labeled as colored or Negro at one point, and then later in life as white or maybe even mulatto. Um, and I think when dealing with our records, race is such a big thing that we have to go up against. I think, at least for me, age and race
Yeah,
really kind of like, maybe it just makes me emotional, like seeing the word Negro on a consensus or on consensus on a census
yeah,
is, ooh, like that is hard. Also, recently I went to the African American Museum in DC. Have you been there yet?
yeah, absolutely.
Ooh,
Yeah,
I didn't even get to finish it. I was there all day and
it's
I
a
only
lot.
saw the bottom three floors.
Yeah,
So right, going through some of those files, people, likely at least not related to me at all. Like, this is really hard to search and go through.
yeah.
Do you have a process for yourself, or like knowing when to stop? Because I can imagine doing some of this archival work. It's like hunger. Like, you're like, okay, I'm trying to find the next person and the next thing. And,
Mhm.
like, how do you, I don't know, give yourself a break?
That's a really good question. I think because I could have kept going, I could have kept digging, but I had to kind of like step back for a second and be like, okay, what is the point of this project? What am I
Mm,
doing right now? And the focus of my project is my grandmother, my relationship with her, the ecosystem that we've created now, even though she's passed, as essentially a collaborator with me in this project. I can always go back to this genealogical research. I don't need to go back as far as I possibly can right now. Because then
mm.
once I start doing that, then I'm like, oh, but what about my dad's side of the family? And, I started going back there and I found, through like his dad's side, I found a picture of them as sharecroppers. And I'm like, oh, well, I got to keep. And I was like, okay, hold on. One project at a time. Because even within the project, I already had 6 different things underneath it. So I'm like, okay, I know I have the skill set. I know where to look. Let's set this to the side. I'm going to come back. Or what I've done in the past is like dig really deep on like a few people. So it's like
Mm,
I could take the tree out as far as possible, but like, what is the information about my great, 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 great grandfather going to inform me about my grandmother or this project versus like,
hmm.
how deep can I dig on her mother's life? That's way more informative. So it's like I spent days looking through records about her mother, which was easier to find. And I found that, like, oh, my grandmother had another sibling that nobody's ever told me about because she died,
Whoa.
like she died in utero. And eventually, through talking with other family members, I found out like the circumstances of that death. Like, my grandmother's mother, my great grandmother was married to my great grandfather very young. He was
Mm,
like maybe in his like late 30s. He was old and she was young, and she immediately started popping kids out, and she was
hmm.
pregnant trying to chase around a baby and like fell, and the baby died.
Ooh.
And when I zoom out and I look at like the course of her life during that time where she was having a bunch of kids, and then there's stories about her maybe being depressed and like how she ended up divorcing her
Hmm.
husband in the like late 30s, early 40s, and like it all starts to kind of tie together and make sense about like why she was unable to be a parent, not just to my grandmother, but to most of her children.
Hmm.
I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
this context is helpful. Knowing about her
completely.
relatives 4 generations back is not necessarily going to give me that context I need.
Yeah, that's really important. I think what you describing really is discipline too, because I definitely be like, well, I want to know everything about this person and then that
Yeah,
person. And oh, they had 3 kids and there's a side baby over there. Like, I want to
mhm,
know.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Wow. To remain diligent and disciplined at the same time. What a balance.
It is a battle because I love information. I too want to know it all.
Yeah.
Understand it all. I think it's fascinating and interesting. But I only have so many hours in a day, and it's like I I don't want to get stuck in the information gathering plannings phase. I'm really good there, but I can't
Yeah.
stay there. I have to find a way back to synthesizing and analyzing all of these things I've gathered so that I can figure out like what am I making? Because it's like we can build these archives, we can digitize, we can do these things, but like what am I doing with it? What am I creating to help people like actually understand who these people are, who I am? So it's like, most people are not going to want to come over and just dig in a box and like just flip through an album or like look at files on my computer. People want
Mm.
something to experience. And so it's like, okay, let's make zines. Let's create some films. Let's do a photo book. Let's do an exhibition. In September, I'll be having like an archival event, like a party, a workshop, like come learn, but also come ideate and imagine together like what you can do with your archives so that it's
Wow.
accessible to the people in your life.
Wow. I'll be there. Can't wait.
You get-
I also, oh, what were you going to say?
I said, yeah, it should be a good time. Actually,
Oh, absolutely.
still working on this, but this is one of the zines. So,
Whoa. Oh
yeah,
my God.
so it's like, yeah, so it's just like it's easier to digest. You have something in your hand that you could touch and feel and take home and sit with, as opposed to just like looking at stuff on a screen.
I also love the color you chose. That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait for this. This is going to be spectacular.
Let's,
I have another question about your grandma
yeah.
because in the episode "Don't Worry, Jerry's on the Case," which is what we were talking about earlier, about her project for the trees and the water in her neighborhood, you wrote, "My grandmother continues to leave me in awe. The fullness of her life, the multitude she contains. What didn't she do?" I love the idea that that's kind of your grandma's eulogy almost. Where it's
Mm,
like that's what she left. That's who she is. What didn't she do? And
mm,
it really made me think about what I wanted, the question I wanted to leave behind with people. So, I'm curious if you have a question you hope people are asking about you through your life's work.
mm. That's a oof.
It's a big question.
That is quite a question. It's like, what are they asking about me? Um, think if I have to choose anything, I would hope that the work that I'm doing um, leaves people asking why. Like, why
Mhm.
does she care? Why? Like, because I feel like if they're asking why about like why I care, maybe that will lead them to them interrogating like the things that they care about and why they're showing up in the ways that they do and why they're putting effort
Mhm.
and intention into certain things. Hopefully, the work itself will answer that question pretty quickly. But you know, I always feel like a question leads to another question, and hopefully, it leads to some self interrogation and analysis and awareness in their own
Mhm.
lives.
I love that. I personally love the question why.
Mhm.
I don't think most people like the question why very much. So I really love that you're like, why? You should be asking why.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm into that.
Yeah.
I think this project is a beautiful love letter, an incredible dedication. I think even at some point, I know at some point you said something like labor of love is too small. Maybe that was in your intro piece or something like that. And it really does feel like that. And in comparison to where we are as the consumer of the work
Mhm.
in within your Substack, in comparison to where you are within your own archive, which is 3/4 of the way through, I already feel like this is just such life changing work. Like you're doing deep, life changing, powerful work. And I really appreciate you sharing it with us. And like I said at the top, this deeply inspired me. And I think it gave me um, different ideas and like processes to figure out the type of archiving I'm trying to do and the stories I'm trying to tell. So I'm really grateful for that. And I really appreciate that. And I think to close out this segment, I would love to know um, what do you hope will come of this? You get through the whole archive,
Mhm.
you fill out the Substack. What do you hope is left?
Mm. I think it's twofold. I hope that people are able to have the opportunity to like really witness my grandmother,
Mm-hmm.
even an ounce closer to the way that I see her and feel her. And that includes my own family. I hope that they're able to
Mm.
kind of feel what I have felt, um, seeing her uh, so expansively. But I also hope that at the end of this, that as many other people as possible, particularly Black people, are inspired to hold on to their history within their families, like their own legacies, community archives, like to really continue to do that work. I know so many people are, but I hope even on an individual level, people really start to take their own documentation and history seriously. Um,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
particularly now in this political climate as things are actively getting erased. That's probably the biggest thing that I think about. It's just like everybody doing their part to cement their place in this timeline.
I love that. Alexis, thank you so much. This has been so rejuvenating and restorative for me.
Thank you.
This feels like a good place to take a break, so we'll be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Art House, the first Black-owned film lab in the city of Los Angeles. All my photography homies love Art House because they specialize in C41, black and white, E6, and ECN2 processing for both 35 millimeter and medium format film, all while using a custom-built cinema scanner to get you those stunning movie quality stills. So go pick up and drop off a roll at their new location in Chinatown and check them out at arthousefilmlab.com or arthousefilmlab on IG and tell them we sent you. And we're back. All right, this next segment is one of my favorites, and I'm very curious what you might think. Considering we're talking about archive in this episode, you have a wealth of photographs that were very specially taken. This segment is called Photographs Not Taken. And I want to know, what's a photograph you wish you would have taken but never did?
There's a few. It's like, I wish that I. It's funny because I hadn't started photography yet, but I wish that I had been able to get my grandmother to sit for portraits for me, or had been able to take photographs of her before she passed.
That would have been beautiful.
Yeah. It would have been a fight. She did not like to be photographed. She would hide. So it would have been a battle. But I do wish that I had been able to do that, or even more so than that. I think the thing that weighed on me heaviest for a long time was like, I didn't start shooting until after she passed. And it would often make my mom and my aunt emotional that like I didn't get to explore this craft with her. You know, she had her own dark room. She had an enlarger. She had the backdrops and the cameras. Like she had the whole setup.
She was cold.
She was not playing. She was very serious. Okay. She was very serious. And I didn't get to experience any of that with her. I didn't get to ask her questions. And so I think for a long time it was a lot to sort of process. Like, I don't get to go like on photo walks. I don't get to ask you questions. I don't get to be in a dark room with you.
Right.
I don't get those things with you. And she was doing them by herself. And I'm just like, man, like that's something that I wish I could have had.
Definitely. And then it would have felt like a full circle moment, like this being part of her practice for what seems like her whole life. Mm-hmm. Being able to give it to you, which I mean, she still did, but yeah, I could totally see that. Mm-hmm. The next segment is the gear don't matter. But now for you, this could be photography based, archive equipment based. But what's your favorite piece of equipment that you use? It doesn't have to be a camera.
Okay. Now you've given me so many options. I'm just like, oh God. No. Oh, now I'm looking around. I'm just like,
right. Y'all saw that list. It's a long list of gear.
Favorite piece of gear.
And the waves is waving. Okay. We see you.
It's a toss up. I would say between probably the scanner, the Epson V600. It saved me a lot of money. I got it used and I use it to scan all these negatives instead of sending them out. It's made my life so much easier. All the time. I use it often. But I think the other favorite piece is something that I don't use often or necessarily in the archival process, but it allows me to view some of the archival material, is my grandmother's slide projector. I have it down here.
Oh.
Yeah. So she has all of these color positive slides in the little cartridges.
Yeah.
And just throw them in there and project them onto the wall. That's what I did for the holidays for my family and just invited them over. and we sat and looked at photos from like the 60s and 70s that they've like never seen, and they got to point people out
Wow.
for me. It was really nice.
That's such a good idea for a get together. Let's just look at old photos.
Yeah.
Ah, I love this. Also, it's so beautiful that you also get to use her gear. I don't think I necessarily realized that. Like, I'm thinking it's all her archive, but you also have her gear. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, I have her side projector. I have the Super 8 projector. I have several cameras of hers. It's like an Olympus OM1 and some other little point and shoots. Yeah, anything that was salvageable, I held on to it.
That's raw. Shout
Hmm.
out to Grams for that. She really did her biggest one.
Absolutely.
And the last segment is shoot your shot. So, who is a company or somebody you would love to photograph or work for?
Ooh, I love. There's quite a list. There's quite a list, but I think one of the but would probably be most interested in working with, not even necessarily, I'm trying to think about how to frame this. Not even necessarily just like portraiture. I would be really interested in doing some like documentary photography work with SZA specifically. I think that would be
Oh,
really, really interesting. Um, yeah, 'cause there's so much beautiful portraiture and like editorial work, but I
yeah.
think seeing documentary work around like her creative process and the ways that like the little glimpses we get about her like navigating like the natural world and nature and like the water, and like there's such an emotional depth there that I think it would be
Mm-hmm.
really interesting to be granted access and permission to like that vulnerable space in a documentary sense. I think that would be, yeah, I don't know if it's like in my head, it's like a feature piece or like something, a project for her. But I think that would be really interesting.
I like this a lot, and I can already see it. So, SZA and team, holla at Alexis. Let's go right now. We need to see this project in real life.
Yeah.
Alexis, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a blessing on my whole life. I am so grateful to have you here. Can you let the people know where you would like to be found?
You can find me on Instagram at by Alexis Hunley, Substack, same thing. Um, yeah, or my website, alexishunley.com.
Beautiful. And you can find us at Photographer Life Check everywhere you get your podcasts. Specifically, you can watch us and follow along while we're going through Alexis's website on Spotify and YouTube. Please subscribe. And yeah, we'll see you guys at the next one. Bye.